Hello again. What is up? So, today we're gonna be reading, but it's not gonna be a post from online. Instead, it will be the final part of the last chapter of the first book in one of the most influential economic texts in history, The Wealth of Nations. Now, the author of this book, Adam Smith, is now known as the father of capitalism for what he proposed and his arguments against mercantilism, which was the ideology at the time. And so that is something that a lot of people know about him, but something that many people don't know is that he was actually somewhat progressive in how he spoke, and he would take jabs at business owners in what he wrote. And I've read his entire first book, so I would know what he said. He said multiple things about them. In one case, he said that if they meet together, it always ends in a conspiracy against the public. But that's not what we're going to be talking about. We're going to be talking about a specific thing that he says at the end, and I'll put it on screen here soon, and you'll be able to follow along. And when I pause to explain something, there'll be images. So let's get into it. So the first part starts right here. His employers constitute the third order. The third order, you don't have to worry about orders. He's just grouping people into three different categories, and we don't really need to know what those categories are for this. So don't worry about that. That of those who live by profit, it is the stock that is employed for the sake of profit, which puts into motion the greater part of the useful labor of every society, which pretty much means that all the stuff that is employed in profit is what is employing most of the people in the world. Then, afterwards, he continues by saying, the plans and projects of the employers of stock regard, or no, not regard, plans and projects of the employers of stock regulate and direct all the most important operations of labor, and profit is the end proposed by all those plans and projects. What he's saying is that profit deserves to exist, but the rate of profit does not, like rent and wages, rise with the prosperity and fall with the declension of the society. On the contrary, it is naturally low in rich and high in poor countries, and it is always highest in the countries which are going fastest to ruin. The interest of this third order, therefore, has not the same connection with the general interest of the society as that of the other two orders. Merchants and master manufacturers are, in this order, the two classes of people who commonly employ the largest capitals, and who, by their wealth, draw to themselves the greatest share of the public consideration. Now, what does this mean? Well, it's basically saying that profit deserves to exist. Profit is a good thing. But the problem is that as society develops, the rate of profit, which is like a percent, generally decreases. Now, that's a bad thing, because if you're an employer, you want to make more money, not less. And so their motives must be somewhat aligned against the public, because they don't want society to develop in such a way that it causes them to have a lower profit rate. It also finishes by saying that those who employ the largest amount of people and capital, like what I showed earlier, usually have the most consideration and care from the public about how well they're doing, because obviously if they don't do well, then it's likely that the many people that they employ aren't doing well either. So that's pretty much what that's saying. Okay, let's continue. As during their whole lives they are engaged in plans and projects, they have frequently more acuteness of understanding than the greater part of country gentlemen. This pretty much means that they understand more than people who are not in business. As their thoughts, however, are commonly exercised rather about the interest of their own particular branch of business than about that of society, their judgment, even given with the greatest candor, which means honesty, which it has not been upon every occasion, is much more to be depended upon with regard to the former of those two objects and with regard to the latter. Their superiority over the country gentleman is not so much in their knowledge of the public interest as in having a better knowledge of their own interest than he has of his. It is by this superior knowledge of their own interest that they have frequently imposed upon his generosity and persuaded him to give up both his interest and that of the public from a very simple but honest conviction, and that their interest, and not his, was the interest of the public. So what is this saying? Well, it's saying that business owners are generally knowledgeable about the business of trade that they're in.
Duh.
Now, the problem is that just because they're smart in this area doesn't mean that they know exactly the interests of society. They shouldn't be relied upon for the interests of society as they should be for, what's good for this business. Like, there's different types of knowledge that they are more useful for and less useful for. Now, they can actually convince, however, the common people that what the business owner wants, what they want, is actually the public interest. And it feels right because, the business owner knows a lot more than us, but the problem is because we already concluded that the rich person's interests were against the public, then the rich man is pretty much, deceiving the public here, and so he's creating a warning upon that. But the problem is that many of the common people are very generous and put their trust in these business owners who seem to them very innocent people. We're nearing the end now, but now Smith says, the interest of the dealers, however, in any particular branch of trade or manufactures is always in some respects different from, and even opposite to, that of the public. To widen the market and to narrow the competition is always the interest of the dealers. So, what is he saying here? Well, basically what he's saying is that the business owners have two interests. They want to widen the market, so there's more people to sell to, so more demand for their product, and less competition. That benefits them in both ways. It makes them a lot more money. Now, he says, to widen the market may frequently be agreeable enough to the interest of the public, so the public may support that. To narrow the competition must always be against it, and can serve only to enable the dealers, by raising their profits above what they would naturally be, to levy, for their own benefit, an absurd tax upon the rest of their fellow citizens. So, he's basically saying here that, in a way, whenever businesses try and impose measures, or ask the government to impose measures that limit the competition and or widen the market, they're trying to increase their prices above what they would originally be, and Smith calls this a tax. He calls it a absurd tax upon the rest of their fellow citizens, and that's pretty much just, his conclusion there. So there's one thing that the dealers or the business owners want that is beneficial to the people, but the other thing that they want is not a good thing for the people. Okay, now we are at the final part. The proposal of any new law or regulation of commerce which comes from this order ought always to be listened to with great precaution, and ought never to be adopted till after having been long and carefully examined, not only with the most scrupulous, but with the most suspicious attention. It comes from an order of men whose interest is never exactly the same with that of the public, who have generally an interest to deceive and even to oppress the public, and who accordingly have, upon many occasions, both deceived and oppressed it. So what does it mean? Well, Adam Smith here is saying that if an employer or a business owner proposes new law or regulation, it should be listened to with a lot of care, and there should be a lot of questioning and listening to it and thought about it, and likely a lot of criticism, debate about it, and it should not actually become the law until after which it has done that, and it has actually passed through those tests. And at the end, he says why. It comes from an order of men whose interest is never exactly the same with that of the public, so, because obviously, like he said before, they make the most money when society is not doing its best. And he says these people generally have an interest to deceive and even to oppress the public, and accordingly have upon many occasions both deceived and oppressed. He believes that this isn't even when capitalism has begun to take off yet. However, despite that, he still thinks that by now there's been points where business owners have deceived and oppressed the public in order for them to benefit themselves and make money. So, what is the meaning of this? What is the overall thing that I want to say? Well, first, I thought it was just incredibly interesting how the man who is credited for the founding of basically free market capitalism is the same guy who warned so much about this kind of thing. I thought that was something that was very, very interesting to me, and I thought it'd be great if more people knew that about him. And it's not even like a subtle thing like this here, what I showed you. It's only like about 1.25 of a page, but there are tons of examples, especially throughout his first book here, that show him talking about how when business owners do things, they're likely against the motives of the public. And here he's just showing how business owners are able to sometimes convince the public of that what the public wants is actually not the right thing, and what the rich person, the business owner, wants is actually the correct thing to want. And I thought, to me, that was just really interesting. I'm not sure how much I agree with it. I agree with it to some degree, but I'm not completely sure how I feel about it 100%. But I do think it definitely has some value, especially in the modern world where we have arguments with people who side with people who are rich, some side against them, and I thought it'd be really interesting to get some insight. I read this a while ago, but I had this idea when I started making videos here to make a video about this, and so yeah, that's what I want to make a video about. I think this video here has been the one that I have worked on the most. I'm actually pretty proud of it, and if you have watched to the end, thank you. I've probably made it easier with the improvements I've made, like, the music and the gameplay, again, has improved to something that people will actually understand more. So, yeah, that's the end. Have a nice rest of your day or night, and I will see you in the next video.